It's one of the first questions we ask. Where are you from?
I'm Russian.
Ako'y Filipino.
I'm Bengali.
I'm Irish. I'm Korean.
Soy cubano.
I am, yes.
National identity has been used to divide people for generations.
African American.
Filipino.
100% Armenian.
But these nationalities may be more closely connected than we ever imagined, as genetic science opens the door to a new understanding of human ancestry. The prospect of learning more about your roots through science is particularly appealing to people like me who know very little about our ancestry. I do know that my parents were born in what was then India and emigrated to the United Kingdom in 1951. But since I was born in 1963, I've never met any grandparents or any other relatives beyond my brothers and sister. So is it possible that the new science of genetics can help fill the gaps in my own genealogical past?
There's only certain people who have access, and then that's recorded every time they come in and go out.
Dr. Scott Woodward is Chief Scientific Officer of Sorensen Genomics in Salt Lake City. The company, which originally offered paternity testing, is now giving people the chance to trace their lineage by using their own DNA.
We take a look in here, we'll see a portion of the 100,000 samples that we have that we're using to build this database.
For 7 years, they've been building a mitochondrial DNA database. This is DNA that's maternally inherited and the purest form of genetic inheritance because it barely changes through the generations.
How sterile is the process?
We keep that very tight. DNA and the amplification process that we go through is very, very sensitive.
I'm assuming I can't touch anything
Don't
here.
touch that.
Because I'd leave my DNA.
That's right.
The genetic database was conceived by 86-year-old entrepreneur James Lavoie Sorensen, a Mormon who doesn't give interviews and whose son James is in charge of the company.
Dad is a man of faith. He believes in God. He believes that we're all brothers, that we share connections.
Does he believe that our first parents are Adam and Eve?
He does believe that, yes. He believes that there is a genetic Adam and Eve that we're all descended from.
Researchers have collected DNA from 172 countries, over 90% of the world. Individuals gargle a mouthwash and sometimes take swabs. The company's global research has been recorded on video, from Austria to Australia and almost everywhere in between.
Just recently, we sent a team to Mongolia. Mongolia is a very important part of the world. We collected 3,000 samples with genealogies there. We're in the process of getting 600 samples from Iraq right now, 200 Shiite, 200 Sunni, and 200 Kurds.
They've already spent more than $40 million putting their DNA database together. So what prompted the company's founder to do this?
I think the hypothesis was that he could get any two people in a room and through this database show them how they were related and where they came from and how they belonged, and that this would change the way that they'd feel about each other, that instead of animosity perhaps they'd feel a connection.
They've now launched a website, GeneTree.com, where individuals can order a DNA kit for $150. Once processed, they can begin discovering their own ancestry using a unique software program, a kind of DNA Facebook. I went through the process myself, producing saliva and swabs and then packaging my DNA off to the lab in Salt Lake City. I'm about to learn what this database says about my own history.
You can watch kind of the growth of my lineage and how they moved across the world and how they came to the United States and really how I came to be here.
Jason Cassing, who was adopted at birth, is one of the first to do so.
I know my birth date, I know the place I was born and nothing else. I was renamed as a baby and brought from California through the adoption service to Utah. That's all I know.
By matching his specific DNA to others within what's known as his haplogroup, that's those who share many of his genetic markers, Jason quickly made connections.
In one testing, I've learned already there are 5 exact matches for me. And coincidentally, one is in Ireland, one is in Bulgaria, one is in Australia, and 2 are in Utah.
In Utah?
I may have went to high school with direct cousins of mine, and they never knew it, and I never knew it. And eventually we find that I originated in Europe and then really right down in the Turkish region. We've always speculated. I have dark skin, so maybe I'm Italian. Maybe I'm Hispanic. You know, now I know who I am and why.
Are there any individuals, historic, famous, who might in some way be connected to my ancestry?
We all are so closely related, and so I would almost guarantee that you are related to famous people. You're famous yourself. So
No.
everyone who's related to you is related to a
That's
famous
true,
person.
actually.
We can put you on
No,
here.
don't tell them.
I was in for one huge surprise. In an effort to learn more about my own ancestry, I sent saliva and swabs to Sorensen Genomics in Salt Lake City.
So what started as a sample of saliva in
Exactly.
mouthwash ends up being processed, divided, defined, and accessible on the computer
Yes,
as my DNA.
yes.
And from that, you're able then to do matches in relation to other
Individuals.
groups.
In one of these lanes going across this way would be one individual. There's probably about 90 individuals that are represented on that screenshot.
90.
Research scientist Natalie Reyes, who analysed my samples, walked me back through my own family history.
Those are my parents.
Those are your parents.
What does what you found out tell you about my history?
It's telling me that your ancient ancestors who originated somewhere between Northeast Africa and the Persian Gulf migrated southeast along the Asian coast and eventually sort of settled down in India. And that is then where your deeper roots originate. The second population are the Brahmins of Uttar Pradesh. Now the Brahmins, I'm sure as you know, are the highest caste in the Hindu social system.
I like what I'm hearing now.
The other group are the Rajputs of Rajasthan,
Yeah.
and they're also a major caste in India which claim ancestry from ancient royal warrior dynasties.
Now we're getting somewhere.
So what this tells us is that you share ancestry with all these groups. We don't know yet if you descend directly from one of
Oh
them.
yeah, but come on.
As
I may
more-
descend
yeah.
from the royal lineage of India.
But although this royal surprise was uplifting for myself, DNA can also cause an unwelcome shock.
So if a member of the Ku Klux Klan submits his DNA and suddenly discovers that in fact there was a black relative, you think that would be a good thing?
I think that could be a good thing, to realize that perhaps this hatred and this bias that has grown up through environmental influences there could be a realization that that would change that.
You'll know that the Nazi Party grew out of a public health movement. Do you think that GeneTree could be seen in a similar light as something that's using science to discover the relative purity of people?
I think GeneTree will do the opposite. It will enable people to see that they're related, that there isn't a so-called pure race, that we all have common roots.
GeneTree has already had more than 36,000 people signing up to their site. There's no shortage of interest, but according to one expert, people should temper their expectations.
Professor Hank Greeley at Stanford University has said, and I quote, "A lot of genetic results are early, weak and preliminary. One worries that people will think the information is more powerful than it actually is."
I think it's critical that people understand what it is that DNA can do and what it can't do. There are things that DNA cannot answer, and it doesn't happen nearly as quick as you see on television.
Well, I certainly feel I've been reconnected with my royal lineage. And I'm gonna start treating my producer like a slave from now on. How will I tell the difference?